Feel so alive. Summer rhythms flame. We're gonna thrive. Go, go, go. Oh, shout it aloud. Hear the summer sun. We're a summer loving crowd. Talking Brazil ball. We're breaking it down.
Hello and welcome to Talking Brazil Ball, the show all about Brazilian football. And join us today for the 2024 Brasileirão season review as we take a look back at the season where Botafogo were crowned champions for the first time in 29 years, Fortaleza throughout the form book and finish in the top four, and Atlético Paranense's 12-year stay in the top division ended. It didn't quite work this time, George, again. But anyway, join us here with my co-host, George, as always. George, like I say, we're here for the final episode of the season. It's finally arrived. We're here to look back. And like I said, that 2024 season, what are your thoughts ahead of the final episode and how are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you, James. I'd say come on by to you, of course, as always. And yeah, final show of the season. We're looking at every single team and giving them a mark out of 10, a bit like we did mid-season. So yeah, it'll be a good one. It might be a slightly longer one for the listeners and viewers. But yeah, looking forward to it. It's actually round 2, isn't it? You fluffed your lines a little bit, James, there, a bit like Palmeiras did in winning the title, didn't they? So we're on to second time lucky, hopefully here.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Just a bit tired today, I think. Just couldn't quite get the words out. But anyway, we're underway. We're going. We're into the review. I'd just say, George, we're going to do like we did with the mid-season where we graded. I don't know where we haven't got those grades in front of us. That would have been a good idea, wouldn't it, if we could see how they did. But it's I don't know. We can kind of work it out a little bit anyway. It doesn't really matter, does it? I guess.
No, well, the viewers and the listeners can always go back and listen to the mid-season review after they've listened to this one and see how we thought the season would end mid-season. So, yeah, it's going to be a good one, James. And like I said, for the final time, Christmas is upon us next week, isn't it? So, yeah, feeling festive at all, are you?
Yeah, for sure. I'm surprised you haven't started the show with the Portuguese holidays wishes, Happy
well,
holidays.
I was going to do that right at the end, actually, to be fair. But, it is coming. Don't worry for those people waiting on a bit of Portuguese. You will get it before the year is done.
Oh, there you go. Well, like you said there, George, it is the final episode before we have a little bit of a break. We are going to take, I think, about 6 weeks or so. We're going to wait and see how it kind of falls. We've got some ideas for the new year and the off season, obviously, some shows leading up to the season. So we'll keep everybody posted. Keep your eyes on social media and that kind of thing. But in the meantime, George, let's get to it for the final time. Obviously, we don't have any results to go through. It seems a long time now since it ended, doesn't it, to be fair? But you've still got your quiz, haven't you, to kick us off for the show today for the final time of 2020.
That's right, James. Yeah. So, we haven't got this table to go over. It does seem a little while. Obviously, we went through the stage at the end of the season where I think we did about 4 shows in the space of about 7 days, including my big live stream one on the final day of the season, which was last Sunday, wasn't it? Not the Sunday gone, the Sunday before. So it was a little while ago, but but we're here. We're here with a quiz as always, and for an absolute change, for the first since I started doing the quiz, James, it is absolutely nothing to do with the Brasileirão of football in general. It is actually a Christmas quiz for you, James, based around Brazilian tradition of Christmas. So I thought I'd just throw it out there with it being the festive season now. A quiz over Brazilian tradition for Christmas. So my question to you is quite a simple one, really. Actually, James, there's 2 questions. And the first one is, what is the biggest day that Christmas is celebrated in Brazil? I'll give you a choice of 3. Is it the 24th of December? Is it the 25th of December? Or is it the 26th of December?
I don't know, to be honest. I know Brazil is very Catholic, isn't it? So I guess the 24th.
That's right. It's the 24th of December. That's the biggest day of the Christmas calendar, really, James. Have a big party. A lot of them attend, midnight mass as well. Like you said, it's a very religious country, and So yeah, that's it. 24th of December. This the second part of the quiz, James, is what they eat a bird. It's a bit similar to the English tradition. They do eat like a bird at Christmas. But it shares the name, this particular bird, with an English city. So I want to know, which English city does this bird that Brazilians eat on Christmas share its name with? Which city?
Oh, that's a tough one. No, I don't know. I'd need a clue on that, I think.
So I'll give you. Do you want a multiple choice?
No, just so yeah. Well, okay.
I'll give you a multiple choice because I don't really know what I do for a clue. Is it Manchester? Is it Chester? Or is it Liverpool?
No idea. Chester, I guess. That sounds the most likely to be a bird.
So the bird is called Chester. That's the one that they eat on Christmas. So yes.
Well, there you go. I guess we're learning some new traditions. We'll have to get one of them rustled up for next week, I guess, won't we?
I think it's high on. I think it's high meat content. Really, it's based heavily on sort of It's a bit more meaty, I think, than a normal kind of turkey. So I think that's why they go for that. But yeah.
Oh, very good. Well, anybody listening in Brazil, of course, we wish you, as we will do at the end, looking forward to that Chester, I'm sure, next week. Well done, George. Well, let's get stuck into some actual football then. It's not, we're a few minutes in, we still haven't discussed anything really. I mean, we're at a bit of a loss without those games this week, aren't we? But of course, we do have plenty to get stuck into. So we're going to go through, like I said, we'll each give a grade, maybe a brief outline of the season that was for each team. And we're going to go from the bottom up. So we're going to start right down in 20th position, George, which was Cuiabá. Very, very disappointing season for Cuiabá. Obviously, we didn't have them down to. I mean, actually, I think we had them down to go down as the season began, but they seemed to pull away a little bit and have a relatively decent kind of start. They've had maybe 3 or 4 managers, I feel like, throughout the course of the season, haven't they? And then towards the end, they just seemed to sink like a stone, and they never even put up a fight in the end. It just felt inevitable from probably game week 25 or so, maybe even before, that they were going to go down, and they eventually finished rock bottom. So can you just give a brief outline of your thoughts of Cuiabá, George, and then if you would just give a rating, and I'll pick up a rating at the end as well.
Yeah, it was poor. Like you said, James, they looked a little bit promising. They started really badly, I seem to remember. Didn't get a win for some time at the start of the season. And then they picked up, like you said, a little bit, had a little bit of a reprieve and upturn in form. And then they just went downhill from there. No win since early October. That's 10 league games without a win. They ended it with. So basically just over 2 months without a win. They obviously changed managers a few times in the season. They have actually given their latest manager, Bernardo Franco, I think he is going to stay for the Serie B season next season by the look of it. So, that's a little bit of continuity and stability in that sense as well. But it was a really poor season overall, obviously. I think we did both have them down for relegation. So we got that one right, really, James, in the end. And one thing that, did almost save them really was the goals of Arman Isidro Pita. Obviously couldn't save them in the end. Now, we thought he was going to Bahia. It looks like Bahia have backed down on those on that offer now. Looks like it's a little bit too expensive for them. 38 million Brazilian pounds. Which I think equates to just under 5 million British pounds. So, they saw it too expensive. So I think somebody will have Pitta, but his goals will certainly be a miss because I think he ended the season, I think, with the most goals, top scorer with 7. And how long he went without a goal as well. So very poor season for Cuiabá in the end. Obviously relegation, rock bottom as well on goal difference. I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with minus in these lists as well, James. I think I'm going to go with -1.
Yeah, you were incredibly harsh, I think, with some of them scores mid-season, weren't you? I mean, it's difficult. I think when you're grading a season, you've got to take context into account. So you've got to look at where Cuiabá finished last season. where they were probably expected to finish this season. And I think, to be quite fair to them, they've only been up in. It was a fourth year in Serie A. They're not a kind of a staple in the division. They've never finished higher than 12th, which was their finish last year. They lost the manager, of course, over the summer. So I think you're being a little harsh. I mean, they would be disappointed to come bottom, obviously, and to plummet so low. So I go slightly more generous, and I'm going to give them a 3, I think, because any season that ends in relegation, it can never be scored really more than that, can it? But contextually, I'm going to give them a 3. So, Cuiabá, we won't be seeing you next season. I've seen on Globo they've already adjusted the Serie A and Serie B, so they're already in there, which is a shame for them. But better to get it over with, I guess. And we'll see how they get on next season. We'll be keeping an eye on them for sure. Okay, John, let's move on. They're lingering. Let's get up to Atletico Gio, and a similarly poor season for them, of course. I mean, we talk about context. I think they would have. I mean, we for sure had them to go down, I think, didn't we? But we didn't really know what we were talking about. But I think they were always likely to struggle. I mean, they'd been up and down. They were spent a season in Serie B, and then they came back up, didn't they? Having come down the year before. So, but again, very disappointing. Never really put up much of a fight, and I think compared to the way their fellow promoted sides got on, apart from Criciúma, I think they have a right to be disappointed with their season. What do you think? I know you've been pretty critical of them. They haven't really added a great deal to the division, have they?
No, they haven't really, James, at all. And it was pretty. I think it's pretty. We had them down as relegation, candidates, didn't we? Early on, like you said, we didn't really know too much, having come into it quite new at that stage. But yeah, I felt they'd get relegated as the season went. They've chopped and changed the manager again as well. I don't know how many times, maybe at least twice. It's just not worked out. The sort of goals of our man Luis Fernando, he was a sort of shining light for them, really. And they had a little bit of a reprieve, a couple of good results here and there, and some shock results over the season in isolation. But overall, poor season. But like you said, in terms of how they would have expected to fare, they probably would have expected to struggle. I'm going to rate them as a 2, really. It wasn't good enough. I expected relegation, really, in the end.
Yeah, definitely an expected relegation. I think I'm going to agree with you there. I think I'm going to go a 2 as well, actually, just because I feel as though, some people might be a bit surprised to rate Cuiabá higher, but I feel as though Gio, compared to the other promoted sides, given the fact that they were only down for one season, having been up for 3 before that, feel as though they should have given it a better go. And okay, they didn't finish bottom in the end, which was a kind of a small victory for them, but it never felt like they were ever going to kind of get a foothold on it. And yeah, I think a 2 would be fair enough for them as well. So see you later, Gio. I kind of hope we don't see them again in 2 years' time, George. But we'll see how they get on, having fallen down again. Let's move back up.
It's time to go, Gio, isn't it? It's time to go.
Time to go for sure. I don't think we'll miss them. A team that we might miss, George, is Criciúma. So Criciúma finished up in 18th place, 38 points. So both Cuiabá and Gio were on 30 points. We didn't say that. So Criciúma were 8 points clear of them in 18th place, that third spot of relegation. So they had a much better season, didn't they? They really did give it a go. And for a long time throughout the first kind of half of the season, at least, it really looked as though they were going to be relatively comfortable in that mid-table kind of slot. Things did just take a turn. They couldn't seem to buy a win for a while, and they were one of these teams who just really quietly slipped down, weren't they? And then that end of season form really did for them. Of course, Yannick Bolasie was very, very important, and he was a kind of an outlier really of quality. And Tenkati, the manager, George, of course, has gone, hasn't he? You informed me of that one about last week. I think it must have been quite soon at the end of the season.
It was right after we'd done the pod, actually, last week, James, last Monday, and I just saw it. Tenkati had gone, and I think he had a bit of time in that post, actually. So he joined them in October of 2021, so he was there a few years, and overall, I thought they did okay. They did all right. Like we, I kept saying throughout the season, it was their first top flight season in 10 years, so he did okay. Ultimately, like you said, they tailed off and ended the season with 9 without a win, which obviously, like you said, quietly kind of slipped them into the relegation zone. Yannick had a good season, but he tended to score in fits and starts and in doubles when he did score. And, he went a long period without scoring. So ultimately, again, probably an expected relegation, but I think they did quite well considering it was they'd not been in there for some time. So I'm going to go actually with and at the end of the day, there were 6 points adrift of 16th place. So I'm going to go with maybe a 5 actually for Kachuma. I thought they've made a good fist of it. They just fell short in the end. And, again, it's nothing to be ashamed of that, really. There's always going to be a struggle for them, I felt.
Yeah, that sounds about fine. I think they were, like you said, I mean, very much it's easy to stick the promoted sides in that kind of category, isn't it? It's going to go straight back down, especially like you said, for us, we didn't have a lot of knowledge about it. But I think Kachuma really surprised us early on, and they did look as though they were going to make a fist of it. Tenkati looked to be doing a really fine job, and it is a shame to hear that he's gone, and it's hard to see how he maybe gets a top flight job now on the back of that season. Perhaps he might just kind of fade into Serie B. But yeah, I think I'm actually going to give him a 4, George. I'm actually going to go lower than you just because I feel as though having got themselves into that good position, they just took their eye off it, took the foot off the pedal. I don't know what happened, but it didn't seem a case of injuries or anything like that. They just seemed to drift away, and I think that was really disappointing. Having got themselves, I seem to remember saying kind of halfway through the season, Kachuma only need 3 or 4 more wins. And I think they probably did, and I don't think they ever got those kind of 3 or 4 wins. So for me, that second half of the season puts them down, and I'm going to go with a 4 for Kachuma. So another one we'll have to keep an eye on, George, in the second division. We'll be interested to see whether Yannick stays with them or not. That's something to watch as well. So let's move on up the table to 16th place or 17th place. Sorry, George. And this one, I mean, this is where do you start with Atletico Paranense? Surprise relegation, George. I was always going to be one based on the way that the season went with Flu, with Gremio, with Corinthians down there as well, with Gallo at the end. And it was Atletico Paranense who eventually on that final day of the season, with 2 losses in a row, dropped down for the first time in 12 years. Like you said, before we came on, they've got rid of the manager, Lucho Gonzalez, who was only there for a brief time. So, George, how do you assess this? It was a mess, really, wasn't it?
It was just a mess, James, from start to finish, really. Actually, I think they started okay, but it was Kuka who, and I've said it a few times on the pod, over recent times, as soon as Kuka went, they were like lost, and it just went downhill from there. The Verini, I think it was Verini, wasn't it, the Uruguayan manager? It wasn't the right appointment at all. And then obviously Lucho, they got rid of him, I think a couple of days ago or yesterday. And obviously we won't be covering them, James, next season, so it doesn't really matter so much. But the man who's come in is Maurizio Bairi, who I don't really know too much about actually at all. So, yeah, but he's replaced Lucho Gonzalez, who wasn't there for too long, but ultimately a real shock relegation in the centenary year, wasn't it, as well? So adds, like we said last week, a lot of embarrassment to the club. I'm sure they'll be up and up probably. I mean, it's easy to say now, but I'm pretty sure they probably will be straight back up into Serie A in a couple of years, won't they? When next season. So let's wait and see. It's not a foregone conclusion that they've got to do everything right to get back up, but horrible season in the centenary year. You've got to go. I'm going to go minuses again. I'm going to go with -1.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue, really. I mean, like you said, you only have to look at the managerial changes to see where everything went wrong. I mean, we hyped him up a little bit early on. You remember Obi-Wan Canobio and those kind of guys, and he just didn't really seem to kick on from a good start. He went away with the Copa America, didn't he? And I think he was key to them. Obviously, we know how much the loss of the goalkeeper Bento Krebsky hurt them, but Mike Cal, the young man, really stepped up, and it'd be interesting to see whether they can keep him because he looks a really promising goalkeeper as well. But yeah, I don't think it's hard to, I'm not going to give minuses just out of a matter of principle, I think, but I'm going to give him a 1. For me, that's as low as you can go. A 1, it speaks for itself. Centenary year, you get relegated. as a pure shock. And yeah, it's a really, really disappointing season for Atletico Paranaense, and a shame for us because they're a big club, George, and they're a bit of a fun club as well. The Hurricane, we've liked a few of the kits and that kind of thing. But yeah, we're not going to see them next year. So one team who we will see, George, Red Bull Bragantino, of course, managed to stay up on the last day of the season with that 5-1 win against Criciúma. They also beat Atletico Paranaense 2-1 just before in that enormous win, which ultimately sealed the fates of both teams, really. So they finished on 44 points, 2 points ahead of Paranaense, clear of relegation. Your thoughts on RBB, George? You've been quite critical of them throughout the season. They did obviously manage to get over the line. So how do you assess a really tough year for the Bruta? What they call them, the Bruta, Malo Bruto, I think, something like that, isn't it?
Right, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it was poor, wasn't it, altogether? Really, James, wasn't it? You've got to say, and I think I was right to slag them off a lot. To be fair, they're a big club. It's Red Bull. It's a massive franchise. They wouldn't have been happy at all, like I've said before, if they had a team down in the second division. So really poor season. I think they did last. They held on to. Caixinha, is it? They held on to him for me far too long, and finally pulled the trigger. It was a little bit too late, but I think Fernando Seabra, he does deserve a bit of credit. The way, like you say, that he got them together, made them hard to beat, and those, that win, especially towards right at the end of the season against PR was massive. Really, to go 3 games unbeaten in the end of the season was some 7 huge points for them, and and he got them. Yeah, he was hard to beat. They did rely heavily in those final knock-ins of the season with Sasha, who obviously got some really important goals, which earned some huge points. Like you said, like we talked about that one against PR a few weeks ago. And yeah, I thought that they kind of dropped off. Obviously, Julinho was a loss for them, wasn't he, when he moved to Mexico? Julinho Jr., who we spoke about a lot towards the start of the season, and then he left for Mexico. And I think that sort of the goals kind of dried up there, but fair play to them. Eventually, they brought it back round and saved themselves. They'll be hoping for much better next season, James. And I probably expect them to do a lot better under Seabra, sort of steering the team in the right direction. I would have thought. So, funnily enough, James, they actually scored 44 goals and 44 points, which is quite incredible. So, I'm going to go with, it's not been a good season, but ultimately it ended well. So I'm going to go with 3. I think 3 might be about fair.
Yep, I agree with you. I think 3 is about fair. They'll want to put this down as a bad season and just move on and hope for better next time. I think they'll get better next time with Seabra. I really think he's a good manager from what he showed us at Cruzeiro early in the season, what he showed in a brief time at RBB, the Massa Bruta they're called. That's the nickname. He for me showed enough to show that he can take them to a much better season next time out. And like you said, yeah, a goal per point. They're not the only team in the division that did that, George, actually, who matched the goal record with the points record, as we'll see a little further on. But I think a 3, put it down to a bad year. They've stayed up, they've done it, and they'll just want to look ahead now. And they've got a few players coming back, as we know, next season. Alejandro, who's been a huge player for Vitoria. So he's going to come back, and we'll see whether he doesn't stay there in the end. But they will lose a couple as well. There was a couple on loan from Salzburg and the type, wasn't there? So bit of a kind of mix around of the players, but they'll certainly hope for better. But I think 3 this time, doesn't they can't really argue with that, to be fair, George. Let's move on anyway. Let's move up the table to a better story, really. Up in 15th position, George, with 45 points, so clear, 3 points clear relegation in the end. And that was Juventude, and we both took a liking to Juventude, I think, this season, didn't we? Mr. Jean Carlos was the first award winner that we had this year on the show, and although he didn't really feature too much beyond that, did he really, Jean? They had other players who stepped up to the fore, and ultimately they as well had a few changes of managers, and this was a kind of an occasion where the changing of manager kind of worked as well at the end of the season. Obviously, Roger Makeda, they had to deal with his exit to Inter. I can't remember when it was. It feels like it was it was maybe the summertime, was it? I think it was possibly July he was around. Obviously had a good start. Then they did dip off under Jair Ventura, who for me was a poor appointment anyway, having struggled at the start of the season with Gio. And then they got Fabio Matias in for the last couple of games, and obviously he's the man who got them over the line. So George, your thoughts on Juve on a really good season back in the top division for them?
Yeah, I mean, it was they obviously went down, James, in 2022, came straight back up, and they've been a bit up and down of Juventus over the last sort of few years. So, it's great for them stability-wise to stay in the division. I thought it's a great story, really. Like you said, swap the managers around, as a lot of these clubs did. I think only 6 clubs stayed with one manager throughout the whole season. So, lots of them swapped and changed. Obviously, Fabio Matias, he came in at a good time and just got them over the line, which we thought they would do, but it looked for a time that they were just slipping slightly, went through a bad run of form sort of towards the end of the season, but ended up, bringing it home with Matias, and he got them over the line with a couple of really good results, actually. You mentioned Gene, obviously our friend Gene, he got 4 goals all in all and 2 assists, so he did all right, actually, because he's knocking on now, really, but I think that award will forever now be named in his honour, I suppose. But overall, a fabulous season for Juventus, like you said, James. I think we both liked them, and I'm going to go with 6. I think. Actually, no, I'm going to go with 7. I think I'm going to go with 7.
I was thinking 7 as well. I think they deserve praise for just staying up, really. But the manner they did it, they were fighting the whole way. They never really sunk down into that bottom 4 for any kind of length of time. So I think they deserve praise for that. 45 points. It's a good haul, really. Enough to stay up in any season, really. You'd have thought so. So fair play to them. Hopefully they can kick on under Matias. We don't know loads about him, do we? So we're going to have to learn over the kind of the early parts of next season. But yeah, a 7, I think, for Juventus is fair enough. Up to 14th, Georgia team who finished on the same points as Juventus, but had a very different season, really. Was Gremio. So yeah, Gremio finished in 14th. Obviously, a huge drop from their second place finish in 2023, which in itself was a bit of a surprise, really. And there is some news coming out of Gremio, isn't there, George? You've been looking before we came on air. So for quite a long time, wasn't he in the job at Gremio? Renato Gaucho has vacated his position. It seems to me like it was probably a mutual agreement type thing. I remember there was a vote not long before the end of the season. You remember with the fans, if they wanted him to stay, it was very much a split decision. But he has gone, hasn't he? And you'd have to say it was about time, really, to maybe have a fresh start at Gremio.
Yeah, I think so. And you won't bet against him coming back, James. This was the end of his 4th spell as manager of Gremio, so he's no stranger to the club at all. And you won't bet against him coming back. But yeah, it puts to end his time for now. It was a really disappointing season, obviously, from coming second to then finishing 14th. But I think they were right to stay with him throughout the whole season, gave them that stability and that know-how to get themselves out of it. So, but ultimately, obviously, it started under difficult conditions, didn't it? With the situation there in Rio Grande do Sul. But then they sort of stabilised it a little bit. And yeah, I think they'll be hoping, obviously, for better next year. It'll be interesting to see who takes the reins there. Obviously, they've got a good kind of forward line. If they can get those two, the pair of Diego Costa and Martin Braithwaite firing for full seasons next year, then they're probably, going to be higher up than they were this time. And there's Iverson Soteldo as well, the Venezuelan fella who can add a few goals in there as well. So they'll be hoping for better, but it's a poor season overall, really, you've got to say, James, even under difficult circumstances. I'm going to give them a 3, I think.
Yeah, that sounds slightly harsh to me, but it's a difficult one to rate, isn't it? Because they were down lower than they finished for quite a while, to be fair. And it was only really at the end of the season that they kind of pulled away. Then they dropped a little, and then they were fine in the end. I think Braithwaite deserves a lot of praise for the way he came into the league and hit the ground running. 8 goals in the end is pretty good. Costa obviously didn't really get going at all, but Soteldo, like you said, helped out with a few. Villasanti and and obviously Miguel Monsalve as well, who had a quite an impact having joined mid-season as well. So some players there that they can build on for the new coach. But yeah, a poor season, whatever way you look at it. I think 3 is a little harsh. I'm going to give them a 5. They did the business in the end. There was the threat of relegation there. We know they went down in the not too distant past. So I'm going to give them a 5, which is maybe a bit generous considering that we tipped them to be up near the top this season. But anyway, that's what we'll go with. George, I'm going to take a quick break actually at this point because I'm going to insert one of our awards just as we take a quick pause for our goings on in the season. And let's take a moment and consider the manager of the Brasileirão season. Now we've had a bit of a debate. I wanted a bit of a jingle in there, but there's not one to hand. So I don't know if you want to
next season. Next season, I think we're going to possibly have a look at adding a couple of jingles in for the awards that we give out weekly. But I won't sing. People might turn off, So, but yeah, it's the manager of the year award. James, we've had a big debate, I think, between ourselves who can have it. I think we've ended up sort of thinking we're going to give one each because I don't think we can quite come to decision on one.
No.
So yeah. I mean, who was your manager of the season, James? What did you think?
Yeah, well, like you said, it's hard to pick, isn't it? Because it depends on what you judge. Do you judge it against what the expectations were, or how they did in the end? And I think there's a strong argument for Artur Jorge just because he's won the 2 biggest trophies. Well, I mean, Argentinians can argue, but it's the 2 biggest trophies in South America, really, the Brazilian League title and the Copa Libertadores at the first go, his first season in Brazil. I know they've spent a lot of money, they've had a lot of backing, but they were very scarred from last season, and finishing 5th, it's a big jump up again, even if some people would have had them down as favourites. I think he deserves an absolute world of credit, and I'm a bit loath not to give it to him actually, but we've already spoken about Supermercado throughout the season, haven't we? Inter dropped off slightly at the end, which I think counts him out given that they did finish 5th, which was about par for the course really. Ramon Diaz has had a good end to the season. Rogério Ceni would have probably been in the conversation earlier in the year, but George, I'm going to give it to Juan Paulo Voivoda of Fortaleza. I think I was wondering whether to give it to him because obviously Fortaleza did drop off as well, but they really did keep going for a really good time and finished 11 points off the top. It's not a million miles. They finished in 4th, which they did finish in 2021. But they just surprised everybody, I think, this season, really. The way they went about it, they were really pushing. And I think, Voivoda, for me, nobody comes close to him. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Voivoda, for me, I think you're right, James. He deserves a heck of a lot of credit, as does Artur Jorge. Artur Jorge, for me, is the best manager in the league. Doesn't mean he's my manager of the year, but he is the best manager for me personally, and it is an incredible achievement. But also, you've got to factor in he was given a heck of a lot of money to play with for the quality of the division. He has managed at a higher quality, I have to say, as well, probably at a higher level as well. So I'm not going to give it to him, but Voivoda was a very close kind of second for me. I thought he's done a great job. There's no doubt about it. They're in the Libertadores next season, and he deserves a heck of a lot of credit for that because they've stuck with it for a long period of time. They came from nowhere, sort of mid-table. I don't know when it was. It was quite early in the season. They then just started to shoot up, and they've maintained it throughout a long period of time. It has been challenging, but they've ended up in 4th. It was a really good result to secure that against Inter on the final day as well. But my manager of the year, I think you know who it is, James. It's Mr. Thiago Carpini at Vitória. I think deserves a lot of credit for the way that he's, taken this club who a couple of years ago were playing in Serie C. So they won that. They got promoted from that in 2022, and he himself got Juventude promoted, didn't he, last season up to Serie A. He was Sao Paulo manager, wasn't given enough time, I don't think, but there'll be certainly teams higher up the division having a look at him now and trying to pinch him from Vitória. It was a really inspired appointment, I feel, and he's just a good young manager. He's got them into the the Sudamericana qualification, which is unheard of, really. for Vittoria. So it was just deserves a heck of a lot of credit. The way that he could have felt sorry for himself a little bit, having been sacked by Sao Paulo, in right at the very start of the season. He was virtually only there for a couple of months. I don't think he probably I don't know how many games he was in charge. Can't have been many of the league season.
In the league, I think it was only 2 or 3, to be honest.
Yeah,
it was really odd they sacked him.
So they obviously didn't. It wasn't a thing for him. Obviously could have felt a little bit sorry for himself and that sort of thing. He jumped straight back in May for the Vittoria job, and he's just obviously proven his credentials. And I think this fella is only 40, so he's young for a manager. I think he'll go to the top potentially here.
Yeah, there's a big shout. I'm not quite as convinced, just because I feel as though I don't think it was a completely unjustified sacking at Sao Paulo. I think they did it based on the Paulista as well over the start of the season. And he's done a brilliant job at Vittoria, no question about that. But I need to see him back that up with something next year. But yeah, so we couldn't decide. So the manager of the year this year, the first one ever, the Talking Brazil Ball manager of the season, goes to 2 gentlemen, shared award, Thiago Carpini and Juan Pablo Voivoda. Let us know if you have a different idea or you want to stick your colours to one mast. Let us know. But congrats to those 2 gentlemen. Really, really well done. A great season for them both. But let's move on, George. Let's keep pushing up the table because we're not even halfway there yet. Let's go to Fluminense, who finished 13th at 46 points. I mean, Flu. They finished in a decent position. Well, decent. They finished in a much better position than they could have done than it looked like they would do for a long time this season. Obviously, Copa Libertadores champions coming into the campaign. I tipped them for a title. Embarrassingly, George, under Fernando Diniz just couldn't buy a win at the start of the season. He was gone, deservedly so. In came Mano Menezes, who did steady the ship, helped them up to 13th place. I mean, it wasn't all smooth sailing, you have to say, but they got there in the end. I mean, they're another club who just be pleased to get this season over, done with, and move on, won't they?
Oh, for sure, James. Like you said, it started in horrible fashion for long periods of time. Your prediction was looking like it was going to turn into a relegation for Fluminense for long periods of this season. But, Mano came in. I mean, Diniz has just been a bit of a washout the whole season, and for Cruzeiro as well. But Mano came in. It was July, wasn't it? Summertime, and he steadied the ship, like you said. Hasn't been in without his challengers. I think he's a little bit of an outspoken character as well. Likes a bit of a feisty relationship with the fans and things like that, or the opposition fans and things like this. So, I think he's signed a contract, hasn't he, for next season. I think they'll be happy with that. He's probably, I'm just saying this out of looking at no sort of fan reaction at all, but I think the fans will have probably warmed to him after being a little bit, split about the decision to bring him in initially. But he's more than, I think, done enough to win them over, really. And he saved them from a relegation. And the way it was starting and going under Diniz, they'll be happy to finish in the likes of 13th position, the safe haven of that, instead of into the relegation zone. So they'll hope for better next year, put it down to a bad one, like Bragantino, and just try and forget about it and move on for next season. But it has been, obviously the situation with the likes of Marcelo, and there has been reports of, bad temper in the camp, and there's been lots of red cards and lots of disciplinary issues. So hopefully they can put that behind them for next year. But for me personally, I'm actually quite happy to see them, stave off relegation, because, like we've said before, we want the bigger teams to report on, and Fluminense, obviously an absolutely huge team in Brazil. So it's from that point of view, it's good to see them still in the top flight, really.
Yeah, I think they'll be better next season, just because they didn't really concede that many. I think their goals conceded record was 7th or 8th best in the end, but the problem was scoring. They were the 3rd lowest scorers. Only Gio and Cuiabá scored less than them, which is, that's not good. 33 in 38 games is really, really poor. So you didn't give a rating there, George. I'll go first. I'm going to give them a 3 out of 10. I think Mano deserves some praise, but obviously it was a really poor season, and 13th adds a bit of gloss onto what could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll go with that actually as well, 3, because could have been a lot worse, but they just missed out in the end on Sudamericana qualification, didn't they? I think the likes of it'll be interesting to see what happens to the likes of Elias, who seemed to fade off towards the end of the season, but he was definitely for a long time. Well, in our minds, wasn't he, Caru Elias, 18-year-old? He was definitely in our thoughts a lot sort of mid-season, but he just kind of dipped off at the end. And like you said, the goals kind of dried up. So hopefully next time they can, from their point of view, they can really address that situation. And with goals, goals equals points, don't they, more often than not? So, more goals equals more points. So let's wait and see how Mano gets on for the whole season next time.
Yep, hopefully he's given the whole season. We'll see. Much will depend probably on the start that they make. Moving up, George, to 12, and I know you'll have a fair bit to say on Gallo, but let's try and keep it somewhat brief. So Gallo, Atletico Mineiro finished in 12th, George. Again, it's a funny one, really, in a way. It looked like they would be kind of comfortable in the top 8 or 9, really. They were going deep in the cup competitions, going very well. And at the end of the season, the wheels just fell off. Gabriel Milito just looked like a dead man walking, really. And they lost both cup finals. Pretty dismally to Botafogo in the Libertadores after that early sending off. They really should have capitalised on that. They couldn't, and they went on to just sink in the league table, so much so that going into that last game of the season, they could have been going down. They did stay up in the end. They got that win against PR at the last day of the season, which obviously sent PR down, confirmed their fate. But 12, 47 points, George, 5 outside the relegation zone. How many are they off the top 6 there? 12 off the top 6. They were good. They're more than 30 off Botafogo at the end of the day. Thoughts, George? Disappointing season to be a Gallo fan, eh?
Yeah, really disappointing. I'm coming into it first season as a fan, James, as we know, and it's been a really disappointing season for Gallo. They finished third, only 4 points off Palmeiras on the top last season. So to finish 5 points above the drop zone is unthinkable, really. It was and they're lucky to get Sudamericana qualification. Look, they could have gone down. They've ended up qualifying for continental competition, but that puts gloss on it. It was a really poor season. I know they went, like you said, they went deep into the cup competitions, but ultimately they lost both finals. They were annihilated by Flamengo, weren't they, in the Copa do Brasil, and then they didn't really perform to the abilities in the Libertadores finals. So they'll be incredibly disappointed. In the end, Milito was a really poor appointment. Went heavily, as I kept saying during the season, on the cup competitions. It did him well, but in the end, they didn't win anything. So in the end, you've got to say, really, really disappointing season. Again, like many of these that we spoke about already, they'll want to forget it and just move on. Get the right appointment this time. They're still looking for a manager as of recording. So hopefully they'll make the right choice. But, too much too soon for Milito. I think, Hulk as the captain needs to perhaps next season, in my opinion, keep his talking on the pitch. He was quite outspoken this season about various different issues. It just hasn't worked, James. In terms of ratings, I'm going to give them a 3, I think, as well. Not good enough, really.
Yeah, I think I'd go 4, just because they did make those cup finals. Even though they'd lost them, they still had to get through to those finals, and they did that. Obviously they did take their eye off the table, and that can happen when you put all your eggs in those baskets. But yeah, they should have been higher in the table in the end. So a 3, I think, is fair. And obviously wait to see who the new manager is. Luis Castro seems to have been prioritised from what we can see, but nothing done yet. And obviously it might change that. So let's see, George. Hopefully higher up the table next year for you. But not an altogether bad season. There was at least a Libertadores final to watch, even if there was heartbreak in the end of it. So let's move up, George. Level on points, actually, they were with Vitoria in 11th. Same goal difference as well. Vitoria, opposite kind of say, as we've said there, really, we've done a little on Vitoria there already. So I might ask you just for a rating on Vitoria and maybe a quick little spiel just to keep things moving along. But obviously a very good season for them back in the top division. As we've spoken about, Carpini's done brilliantly. They made the change of manager at a good time, and it suited them well. And like you said, they'll be in the Sudamericana next year.
Yeah, fabulous season for them, James, overall. I'll probably give them an 8. I think it was an incredible season. That's the highest so far I've given, but I think they deserve it from where they were. Newly promoted side, like I said, they've risen up the divisions quickly, and and they'll be excited for what's to come next season. Continental competition for the first time in I don't know how many years, to be fair. But yeah, as I said, Carpini, my manager of the year. I thought he's done extremely well. Alejandro is obviously I'm a big fan of, as well as everybody listening to the pod will know. Obviously, they'll be fighting hard with a few teams, I think, to get his signature for next season. But he shares the golden boot with Yuri Alberto, doesn't he? And so he did an incredible job as well in his goals. Kind of kept them up in a way. We've got to say they were only 5 points ahead of relegation, but it ultimately was a fantastic season.
Yeah, I think an 8's a good score. It's, again, like you said, it's not that far away from relegation. A couple of different results here and there, and it could have easily been them. So the table is so tight that it makes it look like they've kind of smashed it. But I think an 8 still. Staying up would have been the goal, and they've done that with aplomb, really. So well done to everybody in Vittoria and for Thiago Carpini, of course. So let's move up to the top half, George, into the top 10, and let's have a look at Vasco da Gama, who had a bit of a nothing season in many respects, which is, to be fair to them, maybe not a bad thing. They have been battling relegation, certainly last season. Another team who swapped the coach around. Ramon Diaz, of course, left relatively early on, didn't he? He went on to do very good things with Corinthians. And Rafael Paiva, George, came in and really did a fantastic job. Unfortunately, they never gave him the job permanently, despite him starting off really, really well. They did have a downturn towards the end of the season, and ultimately finished 10th with 50 points. And it wasn't enough to keep Paiva in the job permanently, was it? Unfortunately, he has been relieved of his duties. Felipe Coutinho came back. That was a big moment for the club. Alex Teixeira as well came back after a brief time away. And there was a number of young players stood out and broke through, but it never quite happened for them the way it looked like it might at one stage.
No, I think they started really well, and they were going really well. And like you said, I think we were drooling at some of the younger players that they were showcasing really early on in the season. There were quite some that broke through. I know your pal JB seemed to go off the boil a little bit, didn't he? But there was GB as well, wasn't it? That came through as well.
Yeah, JP and GB.
Oh, JP, wasn't it? And GB, yeah, GB scored, didn't he? But yeah, we were eulogizing over, and really championing their young players at one stage in the season. And they did just completely, go off the boil. I think 10th isn't a bad season, really. Like you said, that was only the second straight season back in Serie A. Relegation in 2020. They spent 2 years in Serie B before being promoted in 2022. So came 15th last season, 10th this time. So it is an improvement on last time. And Rafael Paiva, I thought he deserved the job. They haven't given it to him. They're looking, James, at Renato Gaucho. I think he's their top priority. And I think they were in line for talks today as of recording with Gaucho. So whether they can tie that one up, I don't know. That would be a really good managerial appointment for them, I think. But yeah, look, Coutinho was a bit. I think he'll go back to Villa, won't he, and see what happens next for his career. Vighetti had a really good season, the veteran Argentinian striker. So let's see if he can go on and get some more goals this next time, and what can happen with the youth system. But I think altogether, I'm going to go with maybe a 5. I think is fair for them. Overall, not a bad season, but a bit of a nothing season, like you said at the top of that little segment.
Yeah, I think I'll give them a 6, just because I think they deserve that kind of praise to say that they were never in real trouble at the end of the season. There was a brief flirtation with danger, but they were never in any real trouble. And I think, having had the season they did last year, I think that's a bonus for them. So I'd say a 6. And I think Renato Gaucho could really drive them on next year. So that'll be an interesting appointment if it does happen. Let's look up the table, George, into the top 9. So we're with Cruzeiro, who finished 9th with 52 points. Another team, of course, like many of them did, George, changed the manager. And it was a really harsh one to change Fernando Seabra, who felt to be doing a really fine job. The fans turned on him. Remember, there was boos around the stadium, and they couldn't I mean, it was inevitable once that happened, wasn't it, that he was going to go. They replaced him with what they probably thought was a bit of a coup, getting Fernando Diniz in, but he didn't really kick on as well. And in the end, ninth probably flatters their form for the kind of last third of the season. They did, of course, lose the Copa Sudamericana final as well to Racing Club, quite convincingly, really, in the end. So, yeah, Cruzeiro, George. Mateus Pereira was a bit of a shining light. Gabriel Veron, who, of course, has gone back to Porto. And a couple of young players coming through. Tevez got a goal right near the end, didn't he? Caio Jorge as well, we spoke about a little bit. What was your take on Cruzeiro's season?
Yeah, I think ultimately, James, it's really, really harsh to get rid of Seabra, actually. You know, again, like Vasco, it's only the second straight season in Serie A after winning Serie B in 2022. So I think it was really harsh. He was going really well. And there were boos, like you said, from the fans, you know, so I think that was him done, really. But it was really, really harsh. And ninth in the end is an improvement again on last season. They finished 14th. So, you know, I think ultimately Diniz was a real disappointment. The Sudamericana defeat in Paraguay, the final in Paraguay to Racing Club, will have hurt them a lot again. And I think they would have brought Diniz in the view of potentially having a go at silverware. So it's disappointing in that point of view, but I think Mateus Pereira, look, I think again they'll do well to keep hold of him. I think there will be you know, teams in Europe looking at him. You know, he's of a good age. I think he's only 28, isn't he? So he's had a really good season, put himself in the shop window. I'm going to go with I think I'm going to go with a 5 for Cruzeiro. I think it's a disappointment in the end to lose the final. And I think ultimately they just it just came to nothing this season. It was a bad decision to get rid of Seabra. Diniz was just a bad appointment in the end. I'm going to go with 5.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think once again I'm going to go with a 6, just because I feel as though the expectation on them at the start of the season was probably to avoid being in that relegation scrap, and I think they've done a lot better than that in the end. You know, they were well clear of it. They were 10 points clear in the end, and obviously it hurts to lose that final, but getting there, I think, deserves praise. It's an achievement in itself. I think a 6 would be fair for Cruzeiro. So, yeah, but I don't know. It's hard to say where they'll go from here. Diniz obviously tanked. Flew at the start of this season. He's got a lot to prove, to be honest, and if he can get it right, Cruzeiro could be a real threat. We've spoken about the players they're going to be bringing in. Canobio, John Arias, I think, potentially. Gabigol as well is going there, isn't he? So they've got players there who can make a difference. So it'd be interesting to see what they do the next season, because it could go either way, I think. Let's move on, George. Bahia. So Bahia were 1 point ahead on finishing 8th place in the end. I mean, again, it's a difficult one to judge because they had such a good start to the season. Rogerio Ceni was making all the right decisions. His substitutions were paying off. We praised a lot of their players, Biel, Tassiano, Everaldo as well. There was a couple of them that seemed to be banging in goals for fun early on. At the end of the season, I mean, they went on a really poor run, didn't they? 8th is a fantastic finish for them in the end. It has to be said. It does get them into the Libertadores based on, you know, the extended placings. So they've got to be happy with that, haven't they?
Oh, they'd be absolutely delighted with it, James. Like you said, they went on a really bad run of form, but they started the season incredibly well. I think they were in the top 4 for large parts of the early part of the season. And like you said, Rogerio Ceni, I'm a big fan of him, James, as you know, and his substitutions. He just seems to get them right. Or towards the start of the season, he was definitely using his bench to good effect. I know Estupiñán was towards the early part of the season was a big plus for them. Obviously, went back to Hull, and now I think he's playing in Mexico. So yeah, it was a bit of a strange decision that, but they were definitely on the right track. Again, 3rd team in a row, which was only their 2nd season straight back in the top flight. So they finished 16th last season. So 8th position is a huge improvement. I know they've got money now, Citigroup owned clubs. So I think next season under Ceni as well, I think they'll only go from strength to strength, to be honest. I think they might be pushing on the door for complete Libertadores qualification next season, you know.
Yep, so what are you giving them out of 10?
I think I'm going to give them an 8. 8th place, finish it, I'm going to give them 8 points.
Yep, I agree. I think a good season, tempered by a bit of a poor run, but a comfortable finish up there in 8th, a very good finish, and something to hold on to for next year to develop and push on and improve on as well for Senny, if indeed he does stay. It looks like he will, although I know there was some kind of rumblings in the fan base that weren't too happy with him. But let's get it into the top 7, George. But before we do, I'm going to take another quick break, ask you to get your jingles out again, and go for the young player of the season.
Young player of the season, James. Wow, I'm just caught off guard a little bit with your kind of interludes, but young player of the season has to only be one man, and we both agree with this. There's no split decision on this one, although there are, I'm sure you will mention a couple of potential people that came close to this boy, but the young player of the round has to only be one, and that is Mr. Estevan Willian, who was an unbelievable character for Palmeiras in the season. Really drove them on when in times of potential danger, where they did go through a little spell of poor form, and he was always seemed to be there to drag them up and get the results going, grab a goal here and there. He got 13 in all, which was 2 off Yuri Alberto and Alejandro, who won the Golden Boot competition for them, but 9 assists as well. He's only 17. Unbelievable talent, James. I think he deserves a lot of praise, and we get the pleasure of seeing him in the early part of next season before obviously he departs for the Premier League. So, good luck to him. He's the only winner for me there, really.
Yeah, you said there was anybody close. There can't have been anybody close. I mean, he's a very good shout to be the overall player of the year, to be honest. Esteban Willian in his first full season at Palmeiras. He's and talk about goal contributions. He's come top combined 13 goals, 9 assists, like you said, 22 altogether. That was more than anybody put together. So, like you said, he really drove Palmeiras forward. He got that goal at the second last game of the season, which took it to the final day. He's in the Brazil squad. He's just an incredible talent. Some of the goals he was scoring were wonderful as well. It wasn't just tap-ins every week. And we got sick of giving him the Young Player of the Year award, the Young Player of the Round award, didn't we? Really, we didn't want to give it him. It was kind of hoping he wouldn't do something, but you can't keep him down. Only 17, and he's only going to get better from here. And like you said, he ain't going to win this award anymore because he's moving on to bigger and better things, moving to the Premier League mid-season next year. So this will be his only full season in the Brazilian, which is a bit of a shame, really. But just look what he can do with it. It's been a sensational year for him, and I mean, he's fully deserving of the Young Player of the Round. I don't even think there was anybody else worth really mentioning as a full kind of contender. The man you mentioned at Fluke, Howard Elias, had a few bright spots and really probably in the end was the key man for Fluke staying up with all those winners he got. Luciano Rodriguez, I think, is worth mentioning as well at Bahia, who really came into his own in the second half of the season. But in terms of consistent performance, I mean, there's been some great youngsters come through, hasn't there, this season, George? We've mentioned a lot of them over the episodes. But in terms of one who's consistently stood out throughout the campaign, it's got to be Stephen William, Esteban Willian. Well done to him, an award winner for the probably 10th or 12th time this season. Maybe not that many, but is certainly might be into double figures now with the big one at the end.
He might be, yeah, and he wins the most important one at the end of the season. Yeah, he was absolutely instrumental in Palmeiras' this season. Ultimately was a failure from their point of view because they didn't win it, but he was every week in our mouths, wasn't he, James? Really, if he wasn't winning it, he was close to winning it and scoring goals. So I'm excited to see what he can do in the Premier League when he gets there in the summer. So yeah, I mean, we won't have the pleasure of this time next year giving him an award, but there you go. What can you? There'll be more young players come through that that will be good to have a scout over as well. So yeah, a deserved winner and the only winner really for that award.
Yep, well done to him, Esteban Willian, our Talking Brazil Ball Young Player of the Season 2024. A big parabéns to him and his family and his teammates.
I'm sure I'll have a real celebration.
Yeah, should,
on that one.
No drinking though, just on the pop, I think.
Well, it is the off season.
Well, it is, but he's only 17, George.
Well, true, yeah, true.
We have to get down to some of the special places that serve those kind of lads. I'm sure there's some around. I'm sure he won't trouble with his teammates. They'll find him some, won't they? Anyway, we're going down a dark path, so let's move on up and let's get up to 7th, George. Corinthians. I mean, what an end to the season. I think 8 was it in the end. They won in a row. They finished on 56 points. They were 3 points outside the top 6. It didn't really matter in the end. They got Libertadores qualification anyway. Snatched from the jaws of relegation almost in some ways. Like we said, Ramon Diaz took over from, I can't remember who was even there at the start of the season now at Corinthians. It was Portuguese fella, wasn't it? I can't remember his name. It was a Portuguese guy. I was mixing up with Abel Ferreira initially, but I can't remember what his name was.
I've forgotten actually. He was the Cuiabá manager, wasn't he, last season?
Yeah, and obviously it didn't work. And it followed a similar pattern to last season. Initially, it looked like they might struggle, but man, they came roaring back. Memphis Depay and Yuri Alberto and Rodrigo Garo, Angel Romero. There was a number of attacking players who just really shone in whatever Ramon Diaz was doing in training, and with his tactics, attacking wise, really, really worked. George, they absolutely blitzed the end of the season. Had it gone on for a few more weeks, they would have been, probably confident of a title charge if they'd had a little bit longer. So a difficult one to rate, really, because it was a season of two halves, really, wasn't it?
It was, James, but towards the end, I think you've got to really hone in on the end of the season. I think it was 9 unbeaten that they went, and I think they won a lot of those games. And Memphis Depay, we've said it so many times in the past weeks where he came, that we thought maybe he was coming for a bit of a holiday. He proved us wrong. He was absolutely instrumental in that run of form, and I think I put it down to he sort of galvanised the whole squad, I reckon, playing at such a high level. He's a Dutch international. He's one of the highest scoring Dutch internationals, isn't he? So to get that quality when you're struggling as a team would have been such a lift to the club as a whole. And, fair play to Diaz. He really had them, in the end playing well. But I reckon that he didn't even have to get them up for those games towards the end of the season. We spoke about them during the Conga as they were rolling into Gremio in the final day of the season. They were so happy at being there and so up confidence-wise. So they had a fabulous end to it. It started really messy, but in the end, they've finished well above the relegation zone. What was it now? They finished 12 points above it in the end, which was incredible from where they were a few months, from the end of it. So fair play to them. I was toying with a really high score, but then I remembered the first half of the season. I'm going to go with 8. I'm going to go with the same as Bahia because I think they deserve credit for the way that they ended it. And obviously Memphis Depay, Yuri Alberto. Yuri Alberto, you mentioned Estevao, highest goal and assist ratio in the league. He got 20 goal contributions in the whole time. That's only 2 off Estevao. So he had a fantastic campaign as well, and Garo as well in the 10. So those front three were absolutely unplayable at the end of the season. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. And I'm kind of excited if they can hold on to a few of these players, which I don't think they will actually. If they can, then we're quite excited to see what they can do next time.
Yeah, I'm going to give them a 7, I think, just because you can't discount how bad they were. I don't think they were in real trouble of going down, but they did win that last 9, and that's kind of a quarter of the season, really. So, yeah, well done to Corinthians. Exciting to see them on a good path because they've been on a bad one for a little while. So next season's a big one for them, and they're going into it certainly on the back of some brilliant form. Let's go into the top 6 then, George, and let's look at Sao Paulo. So they were 3 points clear of Corinthians in the end. Luis Zubeldia, as we said, took over from Thiago Carpini very, very early doors in the season. I think he's done a good job. They were Copa do Brazil winners last year, 2023. They didn't manage to replicate that. They didn't get a trophy this time, but he kept them very much consistent up there in the top kind of 6 throughout the season. They ended the season really badly with 3 defeats. I don't think they won in the last 5 or 6. And you don't know whether maybe that'll put Zubeldia under a little pressure heading into that new season. But for me, kind of a good season for Sao Paulo, a season they can build on.
Yeah, again, they finished in the Lib qualification. They'll have to qualify for it. But again, it's an improvement on last season where they were 11th, James. Obviously, I think it was probably a bit of a surprise. They won the Copa do Brazil last time. So I don't think they'll be too disappointed, really, that they didn't win any silverware. They did qualify for the top continental competition. So they'll probably be quite happy with that. Zubeldia had the majority of the season, didn't he? After coming from was it Ecuador? I think he came from managing in Ecuador at LDU. Yeah, they were beaten by Fortaleza, weren't they, in the Sudamericana final last season? So, yeah, he came in. He did a good job. But ultimately, it just faded out. I think it just fizzled out. And like you said, maybe he might be under a little bit of pressure for the way that they did finish it, really. It was a little bit of a damp squid in the end of it all, really, wasn't it? So it was a bit disappointing. But overall, I think probably I'll give them a 6. It was a solid season in the end. Probably slightly disappointing they didn't finish any higher up, given that they had so much time to build on that, and they just kind of fell flat in the end. But I think Zubeldia overall did a good job. So I think 6 is probably fair.
Yeah, I think I'll give them a 7 again, just because I think they did well to stay up there, kept it steady, never had any kind of under threat of dropping deeper into the table. William Gomez was a good young player we spoke about, came through. Luciano Neves had a good year, didn't he? And Lucas Moura, of course, was a big part of their season. So a good season for Sao Paulo, something to cling on to, I think, to build on, as I said. Up to 5th, George, and my boys, Inter, the Rolo Compressor. Good season, good end to the season, certainly. I mean, they were the form side before Corinthians just decided to blitz everybody. Inter were doing pretty much the same and couldn't be beaten for a long, long time. They did seem to think they could win the title quite late on into the season. Obviously, that didn't happen in the end, but from the position they were in at the start, you spoke about Gremio with the Rio Grande do Sul, the tragic weather conditions. Obviously, they were without the home for quite a long time. They had to play all around the kind of the region and different regions sometimes as well. So difficult for them. Roger Mercado came in. It was Cadet, wasn't it, at the start of the season? Things weren't really going so well. It felt inevitable. Again, I think the crowd kind of turned on him, and Roger Mercado was quite a brave appointment, I think, from the owners, just because obviously a Gremio man, very much a Gremio man, Juventude as well, a kind of a regional rival, and fans weren't happy initially. You know, it took him a long time to win them over, but the way you win them over in football is very simple, isn't it, George? You win games, and that's exactly what he did. Alan Patrick, Wesley, and another kind of attack which was on fire really for large parts of that second half of the season. And yeah, a good finish. 3 defeats in a row really kind of tempered that feeling. It made it a little bit of an anticlimax. They were 3 points off Fortaleza, who pummeled them on the last day of the season. So a bit of a poor end to the season. And again, given the way that the managerial merry-go-round is in Brazil, you do wonder whether it puts Supermercado at a little bit of pressure going into the season. Obviously, as an Inter fan, for me, a good season, good to get to know the team and everything, and ended it in a positive way despite those defeats. But how did you see Inter's campaign overall?
Yeah, ultimately, James, it was a success. I think they will. I don't know if Mercado will be under pressure, but I think they will definitely see it as a little bit of a disappointment not to finish in just automatic qualification for the Libertadores next time, and they will have to go like Sao Paulo through a qualification round for it. But ultimately, from where they were always had games in hand, which you definitely felt strongly that they would make up their ground, and eventually they did. Obviously, they were unbeaten in 16 of the last 19 league games, which was an incredible run of 16 unbeaten before those 3 defeats you mentioned. Although those 3 defeats were to 3 of the teams that finished in the top 4, weren't they? So there was no real disgrace in that. Overall, Mercado, I think, deserves a lot of praise. Sorry for what he did to the team, that mad unbeaten run. It was tough conditions to start with Coudet, and the weather conditions, the tragedy in Rio Grande do Sul was horrible, and it obviously affected them greatly, and seemed to be the team out the 3 teams involved really that it did seem to affect the heaviest. But once they got their act together, things calmed down. They deserve a lot of praise and credit for how they finished the season off. So I'm going to give them an 8. I think Mercado deserves a lot of praise. I think the team does. Like you said, Wesley was a real thorn in the opposition sides a lot of the time. Patrick seemed to end the season extremely well. And he can really hit a ball, can't he? And Bore as well started to really, as the season went on, give his quality to the side as well. So I think they deserve a lot of credit. And they'd be pushing, if they can stabilise it, they'll be pushing for for qualification and potentially the title next time. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, Bernabé, the fullback as well, is one who's been very, very highly rated this season. And he's on loan from Celtic, so I'm not sure whether he's going to go back, young left back, but he's been very good as well. I give him a 7. I think you may be always critical of your own club, aren't you? But I'd give him a 7. I think it could have been better that early part, and I think 5th is more or less par for the course for Inter, and they were quite a way off it still in the end. But obviously, very, very positive signs. Let's move into the top 4, George. We've spoken about Fortaleza quite a bit, so I'm just going to, for way of time, just ask you for a rating for their season. Obviously, Fortaleza fans were sorry, but Voivoda's a manager of the season, my manager of the season. I've already said what I think about him. I know you agree, George. Obviously, they've had a great year. So, yeah, what are you giving Fortaleza?
I think I've got to give him a 10, James. To be fair, I think I have to give him a 10. I can't give him anything else. I don't think, because they just that season was so unexpected. That mid-season kind of rise of so many unbeaten games. They were challenging the teams at the top, and up until sort of they did fall off a little bit, but then they rose back up again, and Voivoda had them playing well. I don't think in particular, I don't know if any players really stood out that much. I know we gave Mr. Moises Vieira the player of the round last time on the final match review of the season, but as a collective, they just shared the goals around a little bit. And, I thought the togetherness is obviously there. And they were unfortunate in a sense not to go any higher. But, 11 points off the title, it's a really, really good season. They deserve a lot of credit. And I'm interested to see how they do in the Lib next year as well. So, yeah, I think a 10 for me.
10 is amazing. I think I'm going to give them a 9, just because you can always improve. I mean, once you got yourself in that position, we were speaking about them very seriously for the title at one time. They did come 11 points further back. So obviously, that's not to discourage them or to say that criticize them really. But I think 9 for me anyway. And let's move up, George. 3rd place, Flamengo, 2 points better off in 70 points, 9 points behind the eventual winners. Funny old season for Flamengo again. Tite didn't really quite work out as we'd thought he might do. Obviously, your tip for the title weren't a million miles away. They lost Pedro, which was a big moment, I think, of the season. Was that?
What?
Sounded like a bit of a fart there, but not the first one as well, I have to say. But oh well, yeah, I think losing Pedro is just brazen, wasn't it? That you can't hit the mute button there. But, losing Pedro was a big moment, wasn't it? I mean, he's still come quite high up on the top scorers there, but yeah, cup winners in the end under Felipe Luis. We'll see. What can you say about Flamengo?
I think Flamengo, James. I mean, Tite obviously left. Obviously left the club. I think that was a real kind of moment where you just thought. You just kind of thought, what's he done? You know what I mean? He really put these sort of.
Let's move on. We don't need to talk about Flamengo. I can't believe how brazen you are. Oh God! Flamengo, 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10.
No, I think. Look, I mean, Flamengo, James. I think. Yeah, Tite obviously he left the club. Sort of. I can't remember when it was actually. But yeah, I mean, they fought it back. Obviously, I thought Felipe Luis. I thought he could have. I thought apparently, I thought he did a good job, but I think it just went downhill a little bit. I think obviously the Copa do Brazil, they saved him a little bit from otherwise a poor season. I think they did actually. They did go unbeaten for a long period of time since October to the end of the season. So, I think Felipe Luis deserves a little bit more credit than he's getting from the fans. I did look at a little poll earlier on, saying that basically, some of the fans don't want him there. It seemed the majority of the fans, given the poll, didn't actually feel like he deserved the manager position going forward. But for me, I thought he did well. He did win the cup, at a bit of a canter at that in the final over Gallo, of course. So I think he deserves a little bit more praise than perhaps he's getting, and I think he probably deserves, to get the managerial position on a permanent basis, because he knows a lot of the players. He's been there. He's been around the club for a long period of time, and obviously the Pedro's loss, which was in September. It wasn't like it was. Sort of mid-season, really it was still a long period of the season left, and he was banging in the goals. Remember, before that, he got 11. I reckon he would have probably got. He'd have easily got. The Golden Boot. I think he was only what was that? He was only 4 off getting it or splitting it. It was only 5 off getting it, wasn't he, in the end? And that was September when he got injured. So I think that was a real unfortunate blow for them. He'll obviously be back early part of next year. It was a big injury got, wasn't it? Which obviously didn't help them at all. But to finish third, I think they'll be disappointed. They've obviously got high standards and obviously want to go for the title. Like you said, I did tip them for the title. They've let me down in that sense. But I think they'll be back next season, whoever the managerial, whoever the manager is, basically.
Yeah, and a rating just after all that?
I think probably agree with you, 6.
6. Right, let's move on to the top 2. George Palmeiras, 73 points, 3 points better off. Really poor season in many ways for Palmeiras. They crashed out of all the cup competitions early on. You're still laughing there.
Yeah.
Palmeiras. Yeah. I mean, they took it to the last game. In the end, they pushed Botafogo all the way. They won the last 2. Obviously, they'll be disappointed not to make it a third in a row. But, they pushed hard in the end. Abel Ferreira, I think, should be really disappointed having failed to win anything at all. They are the kind of the form team on the back of winning 2 in a row. Estevao really dragged them through. I talked to Rafael Veiga early on in the season. He didn't really spark until later on. He did turn up eventually, but it was a little too late to get them going. And Botafogo gave them plenty of chances to sneak in and take it, and they just couldn't seem to get there. Perhaps the squad needs a little bit of an overhaul. It's worth saying that they did lose a few players. Luis Guilherme, who obviously hasn't played at all for West Ham, really. And Enrique, of course, who was huge for them last season. The signers they brought in didn't really work. Felipe Anderson never really got going at all. Just a poor season, really. I mean, second place, you'd think it's fine, just a few points off the eventual winners, 6 points away. But for Palmeiras, that's not really good enough, is it?
No, I think Abel Ferreira would be disappointed. He was under a lot of pressure. I think he rightly is under a lot of pressure, but I think he has come out and sort of said he is going to stay. He's going to focus again on the youth. You did mention the likes of Enrique, I know Luis Guilherme. I think he probably needs a loan from West Ham actually in maybe January time, because he hasn't played at all really. He's only played about 2 or 3 games. I know he's 17, but he came with a high billing, didn't he? And he hasn't really quite given the opportunity to live up to that. Obviously, Enrique, same at Real Madrid, but they're obviously, they've obviously got this conveyor belt of youth, and it needs to be tapped into even more. I think that's what Abel Ferreira was sort of saying after the failure to win the title. He said, let's focus now on youth again in 2025, and let's see if they can go and get it. There were 6 points off, like you said. They'll be mightily disappointed with the end result, but I think it's definitely something to, they've definitely got the bit between the teeth to go and avenge that next season. I think given the right, like you said, maybe the squad needs a little bit of an overhaul. Like you said, the signings didn't maybe quite work. The likes of Rafael Veiga didn't quite live up to maybe his expectations at the start either. So, yeah, there's a lot to do for Ferreira, but I think given the quality of that they've got in the squad, I believe they'll run it close next time again. I think given a rating, it's disappointing for them. Like you said, they knocked out of both competitions pretty quickly. and losing it, not coming out with any silverware at all. I'm going to go with 5. I think they'll be really disappointed in the end, and I think that's fair, really, given the sort of stature of the team and Ferreira's kind of ability to win this league especially.
Yeah, I'd say 5 is pretty fair as well. Below expectations for sure. Then, George, finally, Botafogo, Champions for the first time since 1995, 29 years. And they won it really at a bit of a canter. Like I said, it never looked sure. We were always flip-flopping. We thought they looked pretty nailed on, probably about 10 games before the end. Palmeiras came back into it. But in the end, Botafogo just kind of put the foot on the neck, won those final 3, went to the Libertadores final in Buenos Aires and won that. And then won the title a few days later. And, given that the position that they were in last season, as I mentioned, Artur Jorge came in. They really bottled it at the end of last year. You don't really like to say clubs have bottled titles, at least I don't, but they did really. They were very far clear. They started brilliantly last year and they really fell away. They threw games away at the end of the season. So the fans would have been, really hoping that they didn't do that this time. And in the end, despite a bit of a wobble, they came up trumps. So Luis Henrique, perhaps, I think, was maybe the star man. Igor Jesus as well up top, and Jefferson Savarino as well was really, really key in the end. So, a wonderful season for Botafogo, one that will live long in the memory. It's a historic season. And, one the fans will never forget, really.
Oh, the fans will never forget that, James. It was, like I said, a historic season. Won the title for the first time in nearly 30 years. Won the Libertadores as well. Artur Jorge's first opportunity to do it, and he'll be hungry for more next season. I think they'll be well placed to get more next season with the money that they'll spend. I think Luis Henrique, you did mention, I think he is. Is he going or is he not? Or there's Almeida as well. That's
Almada's definitely going.
Almada's going to Leon, isn't he? So the conveyor belt again of expensive signings will keep coming for Botafogo. I think the likes of Alex Tellers was a little bit of a coup as well for them, coming in from Saudi, being quite a high profile player. Henrique and Igor Jesus both broke into the Brazilian national side as well. They've had a fabulous season. It's not you can't say anything else really. I think they'd expect to be there next year as well with the money that'll be spent in the off season. So yeah, I'm interested to see how he does next time. And I think what has served them really well, James, is the continuity and the stability that has brought this season. Like I said, only one of 6 teams not to change the manager in the Brazil around this time. I think they went through 4 different managers last season. That probably contributed to the sort of downfall and failure to win the title in the end. Artur Jorge, I think, will be there for time to come if he wants to be. Like I said before, I think he's clearly the best in the league for me, and congratulations to them. I'm going to give out another 10 for their. I don't think you can give any other score, James. It's been a fabulous, historic season for them. So, parabéns to them as well. Parabéns.
Yeah, 10 out of 10. I think you win the two big competitions, you deserve a 10 out of 10. And Jorge, although there was a wobble, although he spent a lot, he still had to do the job, and he's gone and done it brilliantly. So well done to Botafogo, and they are the first Talking Brazil Ball title winners, team of the season. It's been a good one really to follow Botafogo's story and see what goes on next with John Textor and how he develops that team. I feel like they're going to be a force for years to come, and it's going to be tough for the likes of Palmeiras, Flamengo, and even Inter or Corinthians or whoever wants to challenge them next season to get up there, and they are certainly the standard now. Right, George, that's the end of the roundup for the season, for the division, for the table, for the teams. So one award to give out, of course, is the big one, the Player of the Year award. This has been a bit tricky, hasn't it, really? Because you look at the goal scoring, it's pretty low. There's been no one. I think Estevao perhaps would feel like he might be the heir, really. I don't know who won it in the end, actually, the actual official one, the Player of the Season, but it might have been Estevao, but he hasn't won our one, has he, George? Do you want to reveal at the big moment of the Talking Brazil Ball Player of the Season 2024?
Well, we told with it being Estevao, but Estevao was a shoo-in for the Young Player of the Award. It's Yuri Alberto, James, our player of the season. I think he's well deserved. I think he shares the golden boot with Alejandro. 15 goals this season, but it's not just his goals, it's his assists as well. Second to Estevao with the goals and assists. Actually, no, he was, well, Rodrigo Garo of Corinthians as well, his teammate, also got 20 goal contributions for the season. But I think Yuri Alberto, given his second half to the season as well, just, I don't know, it was just a mad end to the season. I think the last sort of, I don't know how many games, he almost matched the games to goals, didn't he? It was just an unbelievable end to the season for him. And I think he really deserves it. There's Premier League teams knocking on his door now. And I think he'll get a move. I don't think we'll be speaking about him anymore, James, on Talking Brazil Ball. I think he'll get a move in January. So, we're getting it in before he moves. I think he's the player of the year. I think it's fully deserved. And he's only 23. I think, again, the national team, I think Donovan Jr. will be having a look and saying, can we get him involved in the national team again? Because, he's certainly done enough to do that.
For sure, 31 goals, all competitions. Like you said, he's been helping his teammates out with assists, and just his overall play looks electric at times. And I think he's well above this level, and I think he will end up in the Premier League. Whether he'll go higher in the Premier League, I know Forest have been mentioned as a potential landing spot. Obviously, they're doing really well at the moment. It'd be tough to come in and displace maybe Chris Wood, but he's certainly going to give it a shot in a higher division, and he really does deserve that. So well done to Yuri Alberto. I think there were other candidates in there. Estevao, obviously. I think Garo has quietly had an incredible year at Corinthians. Luis Enrique, I think, was very, very good, a difference maker for Botafogo, as was Jefferson Savarino, who really came on big for them at certain moments. I think they were all probably in the conversation as well. But yeah, well done to Yuri Alberto, who is a Talking Brazil Ball Player of the Year 2024, the inaugural award. And I guess he has to get named after him, really, the Yuri Alberto Award for the Yuri Alberto Award for the Player of the Season. And well done to him. Like you said, we may not be speaking about him next year. But in the meantime, we can and we will. And well done to him. And well done to Botafogo, George, and well done to us, because we've completed a full season of Talking Brazil Ball. We've covered every single round, barring, I think, one or two that we missed. So just before we leave the listeners for the last time this year, are your thoughts on an opening season for Talking Brazil Ball?
No, it's been brilliant, James. I think since we started it, coming up to a year ago now, we are actually hitting, this is the 47th episode, so we're hitting 50 episodes into next season. We'll have to wait for the 50th episode. But yeah, it's been brilliant. Like I said, I think we've come on every single week, actually. I don't think we have missed one. I don't think we've missed one at all, actually. So we've been on every single week since it started. And yeah, we've learned so much. I think both you and I think feel like we're kind of getting to grips with the league, which we didn't before. We got to stress that we were complete amateurs, complete beginners in coming to the Brasileirão and having a look at it. So you could probably tell that from the early stages of from the early pods that we did. But I feel now that I can speak about the Brasileirão without really thinking too hard, for the information. So I feel like I've learned a lot about a lot of the teams, a lot of the clubs, a lot of the managers, the way the Brazilian league is structured, the Brazilian national team. I've just learned so much about Brazilian football in general, and I think it's just been good fun, hasn't it? You know what I mean? And learning about the players and stuff. And yeah, we've had fun. People are listening occasionally as well, which is great as well. But either way, it's been really good to do, and I'm looking forward already to seeing what 2025 holds in the Brasileirão. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, Taz, you have to forgive me. I don't know if you can hear some vacuum in the back there.
Just slightly.
Just slightly. Yeah, I agree with everything you've said there. Yeah, we've had great fun. We've learned a heck of a lot, and we know the teams, we know the characters now, we know the players and everything, and it's been great to learn and to, like you said, provide an entertainment for some listeners. I know we haven't had enormous numbers, but it's been great either way. So, I'd like to thank everybody who has listened to us this year. Daz is in the back now making noise. There's all sorts going on here, but it's in celebration of the end of the year, end of the Brasileirão. And George, just before I play that music for one final time, what have you got to say heading in? Like I say, we're going to have a 6-week break or so. We'll keep everybody updated. We'll be back looking at the promoted teams. We'll be back looking at, the preview for the new season, maybe some goings on in the transfer market. So any last thoughts as the Talking Brazil Ball music comes in to play?
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it all as it comes into next season, next year. Like I said, about a 6-week break now. Maybe we'll reconvene sort of late February and see where that goes. But all is left to say, James, really, is to the listeners and and everything, and the watchers as well on YouTube, is Feliz Natal y Ano Novo, which means Merry Christmas and New Year, or Happy New Year. So yes, Feliz Natal and adios.
Yeah, happy Christmas, everybody. Enjoy the break, enjoy the transfer market, and we'll be back with more Talking Brazil Ball in 2025. Adieu.
Adios. Feliz Natal.
Brazil ball, we're breaking it down, bringing the passion from every town. Let the world be filled with love tonight. Sway to the beat, make it feel so right. Summer, summer vibes, we're dancing in the heat. Go, go, go. TBB, talking Brazil, ball, spreading love in every way. In the sound of paradise, we're here to stay. Happy Brazil, spread